You've built up a sizable nest egg over the years. You sit down to write your will. You might want to leave a good chunk for your kids, or perhaps even a sibling or a close friend. Did the CRA make the list to receive up to 50% of your RRSP? Did you include the CRA anywhere at all in your will? No, I didn't think so. It's your favourite Scotsman here again, and today I'm here to show you how to stop giving the CRA 50% of your RRSP when you pass away, and instead give it to those that you love most. Stick around until the end, as I will give you 3 tips that you must know when trying to implement this strategy on your own. Alright, let's get into it. RRSPs are very beneficial vehicles for deferring tax while you're still working. The word deferring here is a big one. You aren't eliminating tax, you're simply just pushing it out to a later date. You get a nice big tax break of potentially 50% or more while you're working and making a decent annual salary. And then once you retire, you end up drawing the funds out in a much lower tax bracket, possibly even 20% or less. Now, all this assumes that you live a long life and draw down your RRSP over time. What happens if you pass away early though? Well, here is the kicker. The government wasn't going to let you have your cake and eat it now, were they? That's not very on brand. Whatever the value of your RRSP was on the date of your death, you must include it on the tax return for that year. And now, assuming you still have a sizable amount in RRSPs, this can mean up to 50% being handed off to the CRA, give or take. Now, I'm sure that sounds like something that I can imagine most of you would want to avoid given the choice. Well, today we're going to look at the example of a real life client who for this video will go by the name of Ruby Martin. This specific example has been in high demand from our community, so here we go. Ruby is a 60-year-old widow with $1 million in her RRSP account. She and her husband were diligent savers, but after his passing a couple of years ago, the full balance of his RRSP account is now in Ruby's hands. The passing of her late husband left Ruby lost. Her husband was her rock and, amongst many other things, the family CFO. After sitting down with us though, we managed to take away some of the stress from Ruby and put together a plan for what was most important to her, leaving as much as possible to her 3 adult children. Ruby is now retired. She lives a modest life and estimates she'll need around $50,000 a year or so for living expenses. On top of that, she expects to receive maximum CPP and OAS. We're going to look at how Ruby can draw down her RRSP and compare the impact of just drawing what she needs for living expenses each year versus an accelerated drawdown, or the RRSP Meltdown as it's commonly referred to. With the accelerated drawdown, we will show the impact of having a TFSA available to fund the excess RRSP draws versus only having an unregistered account. Very quickly, I wanted to let you know about our free retirement guide. Over 1,500 people have read it, and to quote Bob, it is the best retirement guide I have read on the internet. So, click on the link in the pinned comment section and get your copy today. Okay, back to it. In all scenarios, we are going to assume a conservative investment return of 5% annually for all periods. Although Ruby is a widow, if you're watching this and you've got a significant other in your life, don't worry. Many of the principles that we're going to talk about can be applied to couples too. Okay, scenario 1. In this scenario, Ruby takes her CPP at age 60 and only takes what she needs to cover monthly expenses from her RRSP. Let's say Ruby passes away at age 80. You can see from the charts here that Ruby's estate would owe $439,185 in tax and be left with a total estate value of $450,169. So moving on to scenario 2. This time, Ruby takes CPP and OAS at age 65. Instead of just taking what she needs for living expenses, she draws down as much RRSP as possible in the 30% tax bracket. She transfers the excess funds as much as possible into a TFSA, with the balance going to a non-registered investment account. If we again look at Ruby's age 80, you can see the taxes owed by her estate are a little over $1,000, with the total after-tax estate climbing to just shy of 600 grand. In this example, with a bit of foresight and proper planning, Ruby's effectively managed to take the best part of $150,000 out of the CRA's hands and back into the hands of those that she loves most. Who doesn't want that? Let's look at some more examples. What happens if Ruby passes away at an age that is not 80? Let's stack the estate after tax columns side by side from each scenario, and you can see that by implementing this RRSP meltdown strategy, Ruby ends up with a larger after-tax estate every year from age 66 onwards. Now, let's look at a third scenario. Let's say that Ruby already has a TFSA that is maximised and kept aside for one-time larger expenses. So drawing down our RRSP and putting the excess funds into a TFSA is not an option. Instead, Ruby has to put all of the excess funds into a non-registered account. The drawback lies in Ruby's annual taxation on dividends, interest and capital gains. If we again look at Ruby's age 80, you can see the taxes owed by her estate are a little under $8,000, with the total after-tax estate this time declining to just over $541,000. This compares to the $600,000 in scenario 2, but crucially, it's still over $90,000 better off than scenario 1. Now, like we did in the previous comparison, let's stack the estate after-tax columns side by side so you can see each year by Ruby's age. Just as a reminder, we have scenario 1 where Ruby has taken no more income than she needs to cover her living expenses from her RRSP, versus scenario 3 where she's drawn down as much RRSP as possible in the 30% tax bracket, but crucially, this time around does not have any TFSA contribution room for the excess RRSP funds. You can see that again from Ruby's age of 66 right up until age 89, Ruby has a greater after-tax estate by implementing the drawdown strategy. After age 89, the benefits are diminished. The key message here, if you're implementing an RRSP drawdown strategy, having the ability to load up a TFSA is extremely beneficial. If that's not an option though, a non-registered account is a viable second option. Now, I did promise you 3 must-know tips to take away with you. First off, the benefits of this strategy start to become significantly reduced once you start to hit the OAS clawback range, which is just under $91,000 of net income currently. You generally don't want to be creeping into OAS clawback unless you feel your life expectancy has been shortened substantially. Secondly, focusing on the tax rates is key. Maximising the lowest tax rate is a no-brainer for most. And as we just showed today, taking that up a notch to the 30% level can still be very effective. As you start to climb through the tax brackets though, that's when you should start considering your overall health and general life expectancy and whether the additional tax payable now will be worth it over the long run. Finally, this strategy is highly effective in years when you have little or no income. A great example would be if you retire early, say at age 55 or 60. Before starting CPP and OAS, you could focus on drawing down your RRSP as much as possible. We have gone through this process with several of our clients, and generally speaking, there's room to implement this in some form for most of you out there. I would again encourage you to download our free retirement guide by clicking on the link in the pinned comment. And have you ever wondered if you're making mistakes when it comes to your retirement withdrawals without even knowing it? This next video will tell you exactly how to fix that.